Neverwinter Nights Tactica. And in this Tactica vlog, we've been exploring different feats. I have tried dirty fighting. Now we're going to look at disarm. And this is one of those fights that kind of you can see on a martial class. Fighting a martial class, of course, that's going to work because you're going to have the boosts with strength to help power it. But it also works well with other character classes to the point where it's possible to take it not only for the lulls, but the tactical advantage that it could present something different. We talk about traditionally playing an arcane-based class, maybe like a wizard or a sorcerer. And yes, you're going to be blasting out tons and tons of spells. You're not really going to get up there and be fighting with combat weapons. Depends on the build. But generally, your buffs outside of True Strike, but your buffs outside of flaming weapons and enhancements, you'll put those on the hirelings, or you'll throw those on the summons. You want to stay back and blast away. So this idea of disarm, it's not something that you would normally take on a wizard or a sorcerer. But you could, especially if you have access to invisibility or stealth-based casts. There's some interesting tactica and positioning that could go on. So let's explore the idea of disarm. You've paid the tax. You're going to buy into it. Essentially what it does is it gives you a chance. It gives you a chance. This is D&D 3.5, 3.0, 3.x, where everything has to beat a difficulty check. You have to beat that check. It gives you a chance to disarm a weapon. When this happens, of course, this is going to be encounter-based, mostly humanoids. Now, I have to be very careful. I don't know where you are in your Neverwinter Nights journey. I don't want to give away any specific spoilers. So I'm going to name one encounter that's out there, but I'm going to keep it really unfocused and generic as to not give it away. If you are fighting monster encounters that have built-in hard-coded weapons, natural attacks, you're fighting a dragon, you're not going to disarm. But there are mostly and some humanoid character classes with a specific specialized weapon that can hit you pretty hard. There's one undead encounter that has a weapon, and the weapon combined with the jacked up stats of the undead encounter make it pretty potent. It is a perfect candidate for disarm. Once you disarm it and strip it of that weapon, it loses the magical weapon's properties. But on top of that, now it's essentially hitting from an unarmed perspective. And it's not a monk. It's not hard-coded as a monk or a dedicated unarmed fighting specialist. You just reduce the damage output to 1/3. So there are some times in terms of a clicky and an opportunity where disarm can be very interesting. Now, what are the two ways to do it? Well, a fighter-based or a combat-based mechanic, of course, you're going to have the bonuses for strength. You're going to have other bonuses for moving into disarm. And, of course, you have to have the prerequisites for stats for disarm. You're going to run up there, and you're going to engage in combat, and you're going to click, and you're going to try and disarm. You'll provoke that attack. Maybe you take some damage. Maybe you're successful. Maybe you're not. You have the base of hit points. You have that pool of hit points even before you throw in toughness and improved toughness. Side note, that is a debate also. Do you need toughness? And when do you take it? Because the core game engine wants to push that over like on every single character class. And with some careful play, look, hit points are hit points. It's D&D 3.x. You need all the hit points you can get. But you can possibly navigate without toughness if you're looking at positioning as opposed to just point and click and run into combat and have the engine drive itself. But there are also some powerful feats, especially if you want to get into prestige classes and qualifying for those, paying that feat tax to jump into it, maybe feats that I don't really want, but I've got to pay that tax to get into those classes while still preserving the feats, especially if I'm playing an arcane, meta magic, and things like that I need. So sometimes having the feats is important with how you want to utilize it. Fighter, you're going to go up there. Disarm for kind of a stealth-based class. And, well, I should say, for a stealth-based approach. Now, this could be a bard or a rogue. This could also be a battle sorcerer. Not so much a wizard, but a battle sorcerer where half of your feats are focused on weapon buffs and utilizing weapons, and then the other half are dealing with direct damage. And you're also jacking up You might go into Shadow Dancer, but you're jacking up stealth, so this way you can blast from a distance, stealth, hide, sneak up, and also make some physical attacks. And while you're not dealing the 1d8 plus this, plus that, plus sneak attack, plus poison, plus assassin damage, you're not doing that, but you're still dealing significant damage. You're still dealing good alpha, but what you have is, before going in, casting off missile storms, casting off punching fists, casting off all these really, really powerful spells, especially if they're area effect and the monsters don't have a way to regenerate, or they're not going to start drinking healing pots everywhere. It gets kind of interesting. Where Disarm fits into that, opening up different character possibilities to play, breaking out of a defined character class, is if you can go stealth, and if you can go invisible, and you can engage and get that first strike on there, even with a lower DC because I don't have the massive strength bonuses, although I can sort of make that up with some buffs and potions and spells and some abilities. Never going to be the same as a dedicated fighter, but I can get a plus something to add to that DC check to pay the penalty tax. You can disarm. Now, where do I play it? Certainly, and there's no right or wrong way to play Neverwinter Nights. It's a meta game. You just jack up the DC, you just pile it on, and you just point and click, and you blast away. And that works. I mean, that explains basically D&D 3.x all the way up to the current edition of D&D. You just pile on the modifiers, and before you even roll a D20, you beat the DC. Or to roll to hit, before I even roll it, I've got like a plus 30 to hit, right? True strikes like baby cakes. True strikes nothing compared to what I can generate. And there's nothing wrong with playing that way. And certain modules in Neverwinter Nights are super jacked up, where if you're not going in, with double digits plus before the game engine even rolls something, you're underpowered. You're going to get squashed. But if we're playing casual or more narrative oriented, you've played through the modules a few times. You've played a sorcerer for like the 30th time, and you're like, I want to do something different, maybe not super optimized. You could play a sorcerer that's area control. You could play a wizard that's summoned. You can play a combat battle-focused sorcerer. What I'm using to illustrate is, and I say arcane because they primarily cast spells. This is the way to break out of that. Playing with Disarm and being able to pull that off for a role-playing effect or against certain humanoid bosses, it's kind of fun. It's kind of neat. It adds a little bit of a tactical variety where you're like, I'm enjoying the game, but I played through this module 7 times already. I want to try something maybe not DC optimized, meta optimized, but tactically to see what I can pull off. So in that regard, I can see some classes outside of dedicated fighters taking Disarm, but a dedicated fighter or a rogue bard with certain intelligence to disarm in the right places at the right time, especially with monsters humanoid encounters that have a specific weapon, and the game developers intended that weapon to deliver the focus. And disarmed of that encounter does have anything to fall back on. Disarm is actually very, very effective and a lot of fun to play for the lulls.